We just watched two former three-star quarterbacks lead their respective programs to the national title game. What are the chances BYU has their own version of that on the roster in 2025? Let's dig into it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your first bet hits. As simple as that. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, we're going to talk BYU quarterbacks and the chances that Jake Retzlaff can elevate BYU to the heights that they want to get to in 2025. Then we'll talk about the future of the quarterback position as our position group debriefings begins. And then we'll finish up today's show talking a little BYU basketball as they are in Boulder to take on the Colorado Buffaloes tonight. All right, so at the outset of this conversation, we just watched two guys, speaking of Riley Leonard for Notre Dame and Will Howard for Ohio State, lead their programs to the national championship game. Now, both of them highly, highly accomplished football players, but much like Jake Retzlaff, they are both former three-star quarterbacks. Now, the two of them are two three-star prospects coming out of the high school ranks. Jake Retzlaff, so far as I could find, according to 24/7 Sports, never had an official rating coming out of high school, out of Corona Centennial. But coming out of the junior college ranks, many of you might recall, Jake Retzlaff had a three-star designation from 24/7 Sports as the top-rated JUCO quarterback, according to ESPN, coming out in his respective recruiting class. He has done some really nice things for BYU, but what are the chances he can lead BYU to the Big 12 championship game, the college football playoff, or anything beyond that, whether it's a college football quarterfinal, semifinal, national championship game, regardless? What are the chances he can lead BYU to those heights in 2025? Well, I can say this. BYU is banking on him taking the next step. BYU needs him to come through if they really want to elevate in 2025 and break through and make it to the college football playoff. This roster for BYU across the board, with the amount of tools coming back, the pieces that they have returning, everything that BYU has in their rosters, the roster, I should say, right now for this next coming season, indicates that they are going to be a force in the Big 12 conference and should be in the mix to go to the college football playoff if everything breaks right. The one position we feel like I think anybody listening to this podcast, even beyond it, can agree upon is that quarterback play is at a premium, and BYU, if they really want to take that next step, needs Jake Retzlaff to take that proverbial next step himself. He's had a really interesting run at BYU. Remember, he was so lowly rated coming into this past season, 16th out of 16 quarterbacks, according to Pro Football Focus, and I can understand why. He was 0-4 as a starter, didn't have the stats that would indicate that really anything like what BYU put together this past season was going to come and what he was going to be able to accomplish in leading BYU to an 11-win season. The biggest thing I think about Jake Retzlaff is much like Riley Leonard, for example. I know that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish came up short in that national title quest, but Riley Leonard is more of a gamer type quarterback than he is a thoroughbred at the position. That's more of what a Will Howard is. Look at Will Howard throwing the ball down the field, attacking all parts of the gridiron for Ohio State. Riley Leonard's much like Jake Retzlaff, where he simply put will do whatever it takes to help his team win. Riley Leonard was at 9 carries on their opening touchdown drive, just became a human battering ram. And Jake Retzlaff, he doesn't mind being that if he has to be for BYU, but I think Jake Retzlaff himself would tell you that if BYU really wants to get where they hope to go this coming season, he has to be a better quarterback overall across the board. His career marks are 56% completion percentage, that's not going to cut it. He's got to be 60+%. This past season, he was 57.9%. And that was shaky at best at times, it felt like. Down the stretch of the season, the win against Houston was 42.1%. And then against Colorado in that absolute beatdown of the Buffaloes, just 57.1%. His high watermark for the season, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it is, okay, it was Kansas State, 71.4% on limited attempts, 15 of 21, and a lot of those were high percentage throws. He needs to be able to go from being one game 65, 66%, the next game being in the 50s or even lower than that. You need more consistency from Jake Retzlaff at quarterback. He needs to be a 60+% thrower. And if he can do that, there's no reason to think that he can't lead BYU to a really, really fine season this coming fall. But if he doesn't take that step, it may be that the quarterback position limits BYU's ultimate ceiling as a football program. I have said it here on this podcast. I'll say it again, that right now Jake Retzlaff is a good quarterback, but he is playing at a university that is accustomed to having great quarterbacks. Think about the pantheon of great BYU quarterbacks as recently as Jaron Hall and Zach Wilson. Those are guys who were 65+% throwers. And you go even further back, Max Hall, John Beck, back to the heyday of Ty Detmer, even into the 70s and 80s with that incredible run that Lavelle Edwards had with the great quarterbacks, obviously most notably guys like Jim McMahon and Steve Young. They were incredible, incredible throwers of the football and all-around quarterbacks. One thing that Jake Retzlaff brings that, much like some of the predecessors may or may not have had, is his ability to run the football as well. He ended up having 417 rushing yards this past year, 6 touchdowns. And when needed, he is not afraid to put his body on the line to go out there and pick up a hard-fought first down. But you need to see more just overall quarterback play from him to elevate this BYU football program to what is a Big 12 contender into being a true Big 12 champion. It's not going to be an easy thing to do because there are other great quarterbacks that are returning in the Big 12. Rocco Beck comes to mind, Sam Levitt at Arizona State, Rocco Beck's at Iowa State. There's some really, really fine quarterbacks in this conference and some newcomers coming into the league as well that are very, very good quarterbacks. But if Jake Retzlaff wants to put a stamp on his time at BYU and graduate from, like I said, that good and become a great quarterback that's going to be thought of quite fondly amongst BYU fans, he's got to improve on these statistics. He's got to be able to elevate himself. He nearly got 3,000 yards passing this past season. That's a good number, but great quarterbacks can push that to 4,000 yards or at least 3,500 yards with maybe 500 to 600 rushing yards to push it over 4,000 total yards on the season. So I'm not saying that Jake Retzlaff can't get there, but if BYU wants to get there, and what I mean by getting there means to get to the college football playoff, to win a Big 12 title, to make it at minimum to the Big 12 title game and have a chance to play for that when you were oh so close to it this past season. You need the quarterback play to take that next step if BYU as a whole wants to take the next step. And I feel like Jake Retzlaff would look back on 2024 and look at it and say, you know what? It's incomplete because the stamp that would have absolutely put a really fine label on the season eluded that program. And his quarterback play in their two losses, speaking of the Kansas and Arizona State games, ultimately cost BYU. I think Jake himself would say, I need to be better in those situations. And if he can become a better quarterback across the board, BYU also can take their next step or steps as a football program. And that's an exciting proposition, but comes down essentially to, can Jake really do that? And we'll all find out in the coming months. 221 days away from today when BYU takes on Portland State. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the future of the quarterback position. We just talked about the present. Jake Retzlaff is the past, present, and presumably the future for BYU, barring something unforeseen. Beyond that, going into the seasons beyond 2025, what does the quarterback position look like for BYU? I think it looks pretty darn bright, and I'll explain next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have some fun this NFL playoffs. FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs more exciting by helping you keep engaged in these games. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. It's as simple as that. It's $300 to keep action going all playoffs long. The best part is the FanDuel app is super easy to navigate and has a variety of bets to keep every game exciting, no matter if it's your team or a team you loathe. Doesn't matter, or anything in between. They've got it all for you guys. Plus, when you win, you get paid out instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the matchups, FanDuel has got you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get that $300 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet if it hits. It's FanDuel.com to get started today. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you for being with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network, as they like to say, your team every day. All right. The future of the BYU quarterback position beyond Jake Retzlaff this season, I think, is quite bright. And even though some of you out there the jury is out, I guess I should use that term, with some of these regards to the future of the BYU quarterback position. But the one thing I can say about BYU's future at the quarterback spot is that Jake Retzlaff is going to be the guy this year, barring something unforeseen, whether that's injury or something crazy. The BYU is going to be BYU's quarterback in 2025. Beyond that, well, I think you've got two guys in particular that factor in most prominently to the future of the BYU quarterback position. And the nice part is both of them should have multiple years of eligibility beyond this season to go out and prove themselves as BYU signal caller. Number one, the local kid, McCae Hillstead. Obviously, many of you might recall his time at Skyridge High School. I call him a pint-sized dynamo because he's 5'10", but the kid has got absolute star-making ability in him. He's got a really live arm, and despite not being the tallest quarterback, kid still makes incredible throws, and it doesn't hurt that he's got incredible speed to boot. He is a true dual-threat quarterback. Jake Retzlaff is a quarterback who can run. I would say that McCae Hillstead is more of a Jaron Hall, where you have the true dual-threat capability in their legs and also with their arm. He will be a factor, obviously, to be the backup, the chief backup to Jake Retzlaff this year, but do not count out Treyson Bourguet, because much like McCae Hillstead, he is a guy who has got a lot of talent in his own right. Both of them, speaking of Hillstead and Bourguet, already have playing experience at the collegiate level and starts under their belt. McCae Hillstead obviously is a true freshman up at Utah State before a concussion ended his season early with the Aggies. And then Treyson Bourguet was a guy who was in a bit of a QB derby during his time at Western Michigan University before ultimately transferring and walking on with the BYU football program. They figure in spring ball to be the two guys contending to back up Jake Retzlaff and jockeying for position as QB2 this season. And in theory, if you're QB2 after this campaign, well, you're the odds-on favorite to take the job once Jake Retzlaff exits the BYU football program. So the nice part is you have already proven experience at the D1 level in both of your chief backups, because you can't discount the fact that both McCae Hillstead and Treyson Bourguet have A, played, and also B, started games, albeit at the G5 level in college football. Not very many programs out there can boast that their top three quarterbacks in theory are all former starters at the FBS level. That's a pretty nice luxury to have if you're BYU, and I think it gets overlooked that BYU has that experience on its roster. They will not go into 2026 wholly unprepared with guys who have never seen a live action in college football. They will have those two, speaking of Bourguet and McCae Hillstead, until one of them decides potentially to transfer, that both will have game experience that they can rely upon as they try and jockey to take over this position. Beyond that, you have a nice, I think, recruiting set up for BYU going into the future. I think most notably, you look at the future for BYU at quarterback, is that BYU's been pretty content to go out there and look in the transfer portal for any and all options. If they find an option that they like, they have been more than happy to entertain those opportunities in the transfer portal. And that very well could be a third contender into the QB Derby of 2026 as a transfer portal target coming into the program. But you also can't discount the fact that BYU has some return missionaries who are out there as well. Nolan Keeney is the most recent signee for BYU, but I think there's a pretty strong indication that his future lies outside the quarterback position, because when he signed with BYU, he was listed as an athlete versus a quarterback. 6'5", 225 pounds. He is a true thoroughbred athlete. And I think that BYU sees him more as, hey, maybe a tight end, maybe a big-bodied receiver. Heck, maybe even plays linebacker on the defensive side of the football. I think his future lies outside the quarterback position. That indicates to me that BYU is trying to open up roster spots for the returning missionaries that are coming into this program in the future in the hopes that they will end up being the guys that BYU hopes that they can become. I look at most notably at Enoch Watson. Now, Enoch was a guy, I remember, coming out of the Arizona prep ranks, played at in a triple, I'm trying to say, not triple option offense, a wing T offense up in the mountains up there in Arizona, and then transferred to ALA Academy and played for former BYU quarterbacks Ty Detmer and Max Hall at ALA Queen Creek, and was a really, really dynamic passer. BYU is very excited to have him coming back off of a mission, but that will not mean till after this upcoming season. And that, I think, is the fourth guy to enter the mix at that quarterback position for BYU. And beyond that, you can look out further out. But I think the future for BYU at quarterback, no matter how limited the amount of bodies may be, because I think there's also a thought that Cole Hagan may be in the mix at some point down the line for BYU being just a redshirt freshman. He very well may be. But the nice part is that Jake Retzlaff has got a bevy of starts under his belt now. But beyond that, you already have two proven FBS quarterbacks who are apparently content to bide their time and hopefully see out an opportunity to be the guy at BYU. And that's a nice thing to have in reserve for the Cougars. Not very many programs have guys who have played FBS football for multiple years on their rosters and are content to sit back and say, you know what? Play it out, but we'll see what happens. I'm not saying that Jake Retzlaff couldn't get beat out in spring ball, but you don't have a guy who led BYU to an 11-win season and essentially throw it wide open in spring camp and say, hey, beat him out. That could be the case. Let's say a McCae Hillstead or a Treyson Bourguet goes out there and lights up spring ball. I'm not saying they couldn't beat out Jake Retzlaff. I'm just saying that the level of what you'd have to prove to take that job away from him, very few quarterbacks would be capable of doing that. And I think that you can essentially say that Jake Retzlaff is the guy for BYU in 2025. But beyond that, it's going to be Treyson Bourguet and McCae Hillstead's opportunity to go out there and prove themselves in 2026 and beyond. And if everything goes according to plan here, speaking of how guys appear to be kind of lining up for BYU at the quarterback position, in very clear succession, it looks like Jake Retzlaff this year, one of McCae Hillstead and or Treyson Bourguet, 26-27. And then in theory, a guy like Enoch Watson or maybe an unmentioned quarterback that's not out there right now, whether it's the high school ranks, junior college, or via the transfer portal, they will be competing for the future of BYU. But the back half of the decade here at quarterback for BYU, I think looks very, very bright. So long as it obviously A, has good health, and B, the production matches the hype I am anticipating to come from this quarterback position. But it's going to be incumbent upon Jake Retzlaff elevating his play this year to really elevate BYU. And then obviously guys like McCae Hillstead and Treyson Bourguet, they get the unenviable task of taking whatever Jake Retzlaff accomplishes in a BYU uniform and trying to build upon that. But these guys are built for it. They're competitors. They want to go out there and be the best they possibly can be. And BYU is going to give them that opportunity to do so. So I think the future overall for BYU at quarterback, I think some may be down on it. I'm actually quite bullish on the future for the Cougars at that position. We'll have more conversations like this in the coming days and weeks on the podcast as we get kind of a look back at what 2024 held for each position group, but also a look ahead at what the future holds as well. We don't want to necessarily focus wholly on 2025. There is a lot to look forward to, and we'll try and give you a sense of what the past, present, and also the future holds for the BYU football program. All right, the Cougars, speaking of BYU basketball, are in Boulder, Colorado tonight. Not very often you can say that a road win in the Big 12 is a must-win for BYU, but this may very well be the lone case of that, and we'll delve into why coming up momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. This message is brought to you by the Prize Picks team, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions, or with a B, billions in winnings. Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the action you can handle in whatever sport you're into. Of course, it's playoff time in football right now, and there's a better way to get in on the action with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players in the playoffs. If your picks hit, you win up to 1,000 times the amount of money you put up. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a simple pick or two. That's the best part about this, my friends. The best part is with the flex play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit with our friends at Prize Picks. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes as little as 15 minutes to get paid out from our friends at Prize Picks. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing with our friends at Prize Picks. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level and have some fun with our friends at Prize Picks, where, as they like to say once again, Prize Picks is where you can run your game. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Just a reminder for you guys, if you've not done so already, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. 221 days to football season. So if you want everything that I'm hearing between now and the start of next football season, well, the Locked On Cougars Insider Groups are going to be sending it first. So, and a lot of it will never get out beyond that. So if you want to be a part of it, get a 2-week free trial. Click the link in the show notes below. Join us today, just $5 a month beyond that to be a part of the Insiders Group, and hold that many of you will be joining in short order. All right, BYU basketball is in Boulder, Colorado tonight to take on the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, BYU is coming off a stretch where they've gone 1-4 in their past 5 games. They're 2-4 in the Big 12 Conference. They're 0-3 on the road, and we have just gone through the easiest stretch of BYU's Big 12 season. Don't believe me? Let's let Gregor Bell lay it out for you guys. BYU, so this comes from yesterday, their conference schedule breakdown by net quadrants based on today's ranking. So that's as of Monday. Their first 8 Big 12 games for BYU, 4 of them are quad 1, 3 in quad 2, and 1 in quad 3. The final 12, so we're going into game 7 here. The final 12 beyond that, 10 of them quad 1, 1 quad 2, 1 in quad 3. BYU needs to get wins like they can get tonight against Colorado. Colorado is the bottom of the bottom in the Big 12. Tad Boyle has had a really, really solid program for many, many years at Colorado. But this year, feels like the bottom's kind of fallen out on the Colorado Buffaloes. And I'm not trying to make it sound like BYU should be counting their chickens before they hatch, because I think everything we've seen from this BYU basketball team indicates that almost anything is possible with BYU basketball. But the bigger point to be made here is road wins in the Big 12 are at a premium. And if BYU aspires to be the type of team that can claw their way back into an NCAA tournament position by the end of the Big 12 season, you got to get wins like you can get tonight. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not actually saying it's going to be all that likely for BYU, but the opportunity still exists. It's a late night. For those of you who may be unaware, it is a 9:00 Mountain Time tip on ESPNU. Colorado is 0-6 in Big 12 play. They're 9-8 on the season. BYU, conversely, 11-6, 2-4 in Big 12 play. But the odds makers, ESPN and our friends over at over at FanDuel, have BYU as a favorite on the road tonight. You're not going to see that very often for BYU the rest of the season. You just look at it and say, yeah, okay, that's the thing about this is BYU needs to avoid going to 0-4 on the road. And this very well may be the one opportunity, speaking of BYU, they have an opportunity to go out there and get a road win in Big 12 play. It's not going to happen very often. It's just simply just how this league is set up is that road wins are at a premium, and anyone you can pick up, no matter how poor the opponent might be. In the case of Colorado, dead last in the Big 12, you take every single one of them, because when you're 0-3 on the road in the Big 12 so far, you simply have got to find a way to win. BYU losing to Utah, yeah, that hurt in more ways than one. Obviously, losing a rivalry game, having Ute fans rub your face in it, none of that feels good, speaking from the BYU perspective. But the other thing about it is you have to go out there and prove that you can be a better basketball team. I see glimpses here and there of this BYU basketball team of, okay, They got a lot of talent on this team. There's just no denying. There's a lot of talent. Richie Saunders is looking like he's becoming an NBA prospect right in front of our very eyes. We're seeing Jaeger Demon battle to stay in the lottery, top 10, top 15 in the NBA draft. Cannon Catchings still looks like a guy that NBA teams are salivating because of his length, size, and shooting ability. And I can keep going on and on and on about the talent base that I see from this BYU basketball team. Individual talent is great, but you have to have it come together as a cohesive unit and be a team. That's the thing that I think that's lacking right now from this BYU team, this BYU program led by Kevin Young, is that the team dynamic, it's not wholly there for this squad right now. And I don't have a good answer as to why. If I did, I would be coaching at BYU, be making a lot more money than I would be sitting here as a podcaster talking to you about BYU. But right now, the simple fact is BYU needs, excuse me, still dealing with the remnants of that flu I had last week. So apologies there. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU is still trying to find that kind of, I don't want to say identity, but something to coalesce around as a program. I want to see more senior leadership step up. I want to see guys like Fousseyni Traoré, Dallin Hall, aforementioned Richie Saunders, be the leaders that you're expected to be in this program. Yes, I know that they have handed the reins in many respects to some of the young guns in this program, most notably Jaeger Demon. But Jaeger is in an absolutely brutal shooting slump right now. He's still a very fine playmaker, but his shooting leaves a ton to be desired. It's been essentially a 3-month kind of season for him, where the first month shot extremely well against lesser competition, sits out a month, and since returning from injury, BYU has struggled as a team without his ability to shoot. So, man, the bigger point to be made here is that BYU needs to find something, whether that's a senior leader to simply step up and be the voice, to kind of be the bad guy that is going to really rally the troops. You need to find somebody like that. Like I said, whether it's a Richie Saunders, a Dallin Hall, you got to have somebody step forward. And especially in road environments like you'll experience tonight against Colorado, you got to have somebody step up and be like, I'm the alpha. I'm get on my back, boys. I'm leading us to the win. And then, hey, if it is Jaeger Demon that can do that for BYU, great. That would be awesome to see. But I look at what BYU is doing right now, and I just still question overall what the overall the team dynamic. What is it about BYU? What are they going to gel around? That is the one thing I'm still looking for from this BYU squad. Maybe tonight will give us that answer, and we'll see. But I can tell you, if you want to have a road win on your resume, you want to be at least 1 in something in road wins in the Big 12. Well, tonight very well may be the must win in that scenario for BYU to come out on top and have that W in their back pocket, because like Gregor Bell said, it's not getting any easier from here on now. You are in the soft part, the quote soft part of the schedule, and the worst is it's a Q3 at worst. So Big 12, absolutely incredible league, but also a very dangerous league where losses can pile up very, very quickly, and BYU needs to avoid that happening. And obviously a big win like they could get tonight against Colorado would help, I think, engender some confidence into this squad. All right. That's going to do it. A big thank you as always for your guys' support of the podcast. Hope you have had a fantastic Martin Luther King Jr. Day out there, wherever you might have been doing whatever you were doing. But of course, we're here every single day, no matter what comes, because obviously the offseason is here officially for football with the college football season in the rearview mirror. And we'll have to deal with Ohio State being our national champions. As if you can't tell, I'm not an Ohio State guy in any way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, thank you for all your support as always. And looking forward to many more conversations to come in the coming days and weeks right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.